record. All right, so this demo is going to be about how to take the topographic maps that you have found of your sites or general vicinity of your site, and using those images to start to extract topography lines and build a 3D surface or map of your site. So obviously the maps that you have found, and this is an example of one that I've found, which is the Lackawanna State Park. So it's a bit near Scranton, if anyone's familiar with that area. It's also the home of Elk Mountain, which is a ski resort that my family and I frequently go to, so that's why I chose it. So just be aware that these maps that you found are very large and show like a huge amount of area. So you can see from the graphic scale here that, from here to here is 1,000 feet. So we definitely do not need to model all of this. So you're going to be choosing a very, very small area. So for example, I wanted my site to also be by a lake somewhere in this vicinity. So what I'm going to do, well, first step is to scale up your drawing. So we've gone over how to import pictures or JPEGs into Rhino. So we use the picture command, import that into Rhino, and scale it up from there. So you'll be familiar with how to scale up the drawing as well, where we just need to draw a line over our graphic scale. So for example, the 0 to 1,000 feet, and use that line to scale up our entire drawing. So with that in mind, we can now pick an area that we want to model for our site. So this area that I've picked is also like still quite large, and you probably won't need to use this much area. This one dimension right here is like, almost, 1,700 feet in one direction. But there's only, we can only get so, detailed at this scale. So we'll just model a small portion of it, and then we'll also learn how to create even more additional topography lines. So when we get zoomed in even closer, because in actuality, if my house or my cabin is right here, I probably only need about like this much for my modeled topography, but we can, start zoomed out pretty far, use these topography lines that we found, and then kind of start to trim away. And I'll show you an interesting command called the contour command, which will allow you to create even more topography lines for when we need to make topographic maps and such. So without further ado, we can just get started. So like I said, the first step is to sort of create a boundary of where you want to start creating your topography lines. And from there, we're really just going to trace the curves, the topographic lines right here. So I can use my this curve command, which is control point curve, which allows me to really easily create lines that are not, they're polylines, but they're not like jagged. You see how it kind of curves as I move my mouse around. So I'll just quickly start tracing these. And then I hit my boundary, I click my boundary, and I hit enter. And we repeat this process. I'm not going to be too exact right now for the sake of the demo. And we want to make sure that somewhere in the area that you've chosen to, place your cabin has these thicker, dark topography lines, because these darker lines are sort of, the basis of understanding the different elevation changes. So for example, let me just finish creating this line. So for example, we see here that this darker brown line is 1,100 feet above sea level, and the following brown line is 1,200. So that means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's what, 25 feet in between each one, I think. So that way we know, what each of these topographic lines, what the difference in elevation is. And everyone's familiar with how to read a topographic map, correct? Like, just want to make sure we all understand how they work, because it's important to understand how they work in order to, do this correctly. So we're almost done here. Just a couple more lines. Actually, I might just keep it like that for now, just to, so you guys don't have to watch me model this all day. So I'm gonna put this on, we'll call this our base map layer. I can turn that off. I've put my origin point here. So now we need to kind of go back to all of our different views here to understand how this is working. So let me turn my base map back on. We know that this line is 1,100 feet, and this line is probably, this one's 2. It's probably 1,000. So 125, 150. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The difference of 5. So I'm going to do some quick math. So, and I'm not great at mental math, so that's why I'm bringing out a calculator. So difference of 100 feet in basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. So that's actually 20 feet, right? Let me double check because I don't trust myself. Yes, 20 feet. It's a 20-foot difference between each line. Okay, so with that information in mind, because we don't need to bring this line all the way up to 1,000 feet in the air, because if we did that, then our model just becomes like way up in the sky, and we don't really need to do that for the sake of our models. So for example, if that's 1,000 feet up, everything is just going to be like very, very, very high. So we'll just note for ourselves that this is 1,000 feet, and each one of these will just bring up 20 feet. So that's 20 feet. This one will have to be brought up 40 feet. And so it's important to do this sort of, selecting in a top view or perspective view, so you know which ones you're selecting, and then moving up and down in either the front or right view. That'll be 60, 80, And then this line kind of gets cut off, if you remember here. So the topographic line kind of moves. It goes out of the bounds of my selected area. So that means I'm going to move this line and this line together. And that should be all right. So from there, you can kind of see now how my topography is starting to lay out. So now the question is, how do we make a surface from these lines? So to do that, we basically need to create a sort of closed boundary. So if you can imagine, this is now not really a closed boundary in relation to these topography lines. We kind of need to start connecting each line to one another. So we can use what's called the patch command, which you'll see what that does in just a minute. So I'm just going to trace here using my polyline, and I'm going to start connecting each of these endpoints. And it kind of gets a little bit more complicated here because we want to make sure that, like for example, in our top view, we don't want to just jump straight to this line. We want to make sure we're creating that corner condition. So I want to hover over this spot and over this spot, and that will automatically create you see these, like, I'm pointing to my screen, but you can't see, but these white lines that show up, that's our smart track, and that allows us to sort of use those 2 points or 3 points as a guideline for us to snap to. So now we can continue going. Oh, that didn't work, did it? We'll fix it later. Okay, let's just keep going. Let me try doing this in the there we go. All right, so there we go. We have a closed polyline all the way around each of those points. I'm gonna quickly just nudge this into the right location, sort of make sure I have a 90-degree angle there. And then what I can do here, very simple, is, and I guess we'll try this in 2 different ways. We'll use the patch command. So what I'll do is I will highlight the entire, all the lines that I've just created, and I will type patch. And that brings up this dialog box. And so it's going to ask me how many, UV, U and V spans I want. So obviously the more UV spans you have, the more detailed the model will become, which would also mean the slower your model will become. So you kind of want to sort of balance sort of model efficiency, but you also don't want it to be, so, like not detailed enough that it's not useful. So what you can do to kind of, you can hit OK, which will go ahead and create the surface, but you could also hit preview, which will start to generate the surface for you without completing it. And you can start to see how that creates that topographic surface. So I mean, for like, we can show, for example, if I want to use, I don't want to make this too much because I don't want my computer to crash, but let's try 60. I hit preview. Give it a minute to think. It does start to slowly become, you know, more detailed and accurate to it. So let's jump to 80. And when you do this, it won't, like working in the model after you create the patch surface will be fine. Like you can move around pretty easily. It's just like how long it takes for it to, for the computer to just, you know, run the calculation and do the thinking to create the surface. So obviously the more UV spans you have, the longer it will take. So I'm just gonna leave that at that. I'll put this on a different layer. I'll put on a white layer so we can see how that works. So that's basically how you create topography in Rhino. And now let's say, for example, I'm going to copy this over. You want to maybe manipulate some topography. So let's say I have a house or a cabin. Maybe I want it here, and obviously this is like way out of scale. But perhaps I want to start, you know, messing around with my topography line so that my shape better, you know, it actually nestles into the ground a bit more accurately. So, so like, I mean, it's fairly, I think, self-explanatory that you would basically just, and I'm not going to be very accurate to these lines here, but for example, if I'm going to create some topography lines, and I probably should have used a different line tool. Yeah, let me go use a different line tool. I'll use the normal polyline. I'm going to find where this would hit my cabin, go around the surface. And then start to, you know, change the topography and have it somehow meet back to my original topography line. So the purple is all the new stuff and the red will be the old stuff. And I'm not going to get too crazy with that, but let's say that's what I want my new topography to look like. So basically what I will have to do is sort of delete the portion of the line here, and I'll demonstrate this with some zoom sketching. I basically want to delete the red line that is sort of like between that new line that I just drew. So I'm basically going to delete these areas of that line. And then basically connect the purple line back to the red line so that it becomes, you know, one single topography line again. Do you guys have any questions yet? Okay. So I'm going to use my trim command, and I'm going to select my cutting object, which will be my purple line right here. And then I hit enter. And I just remove that line. And now I don't need this remainder of that line. And same thing again with the other one. This is my cutting line. And I'll remove the remainder of this line. So then all I need to do is connect these lines back together. And then I realized that my snaps were probably all wonky. So well, maybe it's not worth going through this right now because it's going to take a lot of time to fix this. But basically what would happen here is that, you know, all of these lines should be, I know what I can do. I'm being silly. Project to C-plane. And then I just move that back into place. And same thing with this one. Bring that back into place. Okay, so now I don't want this surface anymore. I'm going to create a new one. And I'm going to hide this. So basically right now we're saying, okay, my house is sort of being dug into this ground area right here. So what I'm going to do again is the patch command. Just going to reduce this a little bit. Hit preview. And this is where, like, an instance like this is something where we might want to get a little bit more specific or get really high detail. And I guess the other option is also you can also just use the box to Boolean difference your topography, which might be a little bit easier. Let's just hit cancel on that. But I mean, manipulate, like when you want to do like type manipulation of your topography lines to like kind of surround your house, I would definitely recommend not doing what I just did, but definitely just using the Boolean difference command there. But if you want to just alter, you know, the general like topography lines a bit more to get maybe a different shape, like let's say I want to move this back a bit and kind of start to change these lines. That's a lot easier to do than manipulating the topography like this. The last thing to consider here is still that, you know, this is a very large area that we're working with. And for example, our houses are probably only going to be like, I don't know, like at most 20 foot by 20 foot. I'm just gonna make 20 foot by 20 foot box. So like this is a lot of topography that maybe we don't need all of that. So maybe we want to start thinking about even, you know, tightening up the area even more. Actually, let's say I want to move my cabin a little bit closer to the water. Maybe somewhere around here. I would draw another box. And maybe we only need maybe we want to get a little bit more water. Maybe we only need this much information. So then what I can do with that is now extrude. And we're going to extrude not as a solid. We want it open. What I can do from there is I want to make sure the box that I just drew is intersecting, you know, the entire surface that I created. So I can trim, and actually let me make a copy of this before I delete everything. Now I can delete this. Now I'm left with, you know, just this smaller area, which is probably about only what I need. But now you see that there's also like a lot less contours. And so when we make our site plan, you know, a difference of 20 feet maybe isn't detailed enough. So if we wanted to create a more detailed topography for when we make our site plans, like for example, we make 2D, all these lines, we get our site plans, we can export. This small area doesn't have enough contours. So what we can easily do here is use the contour command, and I believe I might have shown this to you guys already. But if I type in contour, it'll ask me to select the objects that I want to contour. And that's going to ask me for a base point. And I can, for the base point, I can click, you know, a bottom point here, or I can click any point that's beneath this surface that I have selected. And then direction perpendicular to contour planes. So my contour planes are going to be running in the horizontal direction. So I need to select something perpendicular to that. So again, I can just select any point above the surface. And now it's going to ask me for the distance between my contours. So before it was 20 feet, let's say 5 feet is better. And so you see how it basically just generated all those lines right there. I could see them better. It basically created a bunch of new like section cuts through that surface. So when I go back to my perspective view, I now see a lot more contour lines. So we might remember that, okay, this contour line is the same as, or should be the same as this contour line. So then maybe in our top view, we want to go ahead and start labeling. We can use our text tool. Not text object, just text. This will come up and we'll say, you know, that's 1,000 feet. And my text is super tiny, so let's make that bigger. And then you guys can just, you know, go ahead and begin to label. So this would be, you know, 1,005, 1,010, so on and so forth. I highly suggest that you label so that when you go and make your site plans later on, that that becomes a lot easier. So yeah, that's essentially how you make topography. Right now, this surface is, do you guys have any questions before I continue talking? Okay. Okay, so it is a surface. So let's say I want to make this a solid object. I can extrude the surface. Extrude surface. I could drag this down just to give it a little bit of thickness if I wanted to. Put that on the right layer. Could do that, for example. And then if I wanted to have a flat bottom, like for, ooh, let's not do that. Let me just do this again. Extrude surface. Maybe I want to do a little bit further down. And then I can create another box here and use this box to basically Boolean out any unwanted areas. So scale 1D. Now I can use my Boolean difference command. Select surfaces or poly surfaces to subtract from. So I'm going to subtract from this, hit enter, and then use this as the cutting object. But then I'm just left with some topography that has, some thickness. So yeah, there we are. It's basically how you create, more customized topography. Do you guys have any questions, thoughts? Okay. All right, so I'll stop.